This is a Rumble early access, so if you check out our Rumble channel, you got to see this first. So let's get into today's topic. Jumping into it, we are talking about Nightmare Apprentice as engine access returns, as we're going to be focusing on this monster, as this is a very good monster to talk about, as it enables an entire type, and I do think that this is a card people should take a look at in order to understand what the card actually does and what it can offer many decks and what it could do going forward for the illusion typing. So we'll be jumping into it right now. So starting off with Nightmare Apprentice, it is a very standard monster, but actually is extremely powerful. So you can special summon this card from your hand by discarding one card, and you can only special summon Nightmare Apprentice once per turn this way. If this card battles a monster, neither can be destroyed by battle. This is the standard illusion effect. And if this card is normal or special summoned, you can add one illusion monster from your deck to your hand, except Nightmare Apprentice. You can only use this effect of Nightmare Apprentice once per turn. Now, already by itself, Nightmare Apprentice is pretty standard for an illusion monster, and it searches all of the illusion monsters actually available in the game, which is really impressive that one card can do so much for singular typing. But the more important fact of this card is what it does for other decks, what are its targets, and what can we actually gain access to when we try to tech this thing in. So coming into it, there's actually a lot of monsters we're going to cover, but we're going to cover the ones that I think are the most important. So coming up in Dooms of Dimension, we will be receiving Tao Tao the Chanter. Now, Tao Tao the Chanter is, I think, an allude to Master Tao the Chanter. This is already a card, which I'll talk about in a second. But Tao Tao the Chanter is a very interesting card that allows you that if you take battle damage, while it's on the field, you can effectively summon a illusion monster from your hand or graveyard, which is cool. But if you take 2,000 or more damage, you can special summon a monster from your deck or extra deck. So it's really cool. They just have to be a level 3 or higher illusion monster. So that's actually an extremely good card. And I do think that Tao Tao might see some play. The main reason for Tao Tao seeing play is that, in theory, if you can find some really weird combo, or more importantly, if you want to crash it into something, remember, it does have the illusion effect, so it will not be destroyed. But if you take 2,000 damage from an attack you deliver to yourself, you can then special summon something from the extra deck, or summon something from your actual main deck, which I think is really good. Also, Tao Tao is a tuner, so I think this is a pretty interesting upgrade based on some of the monsters we've received before, so it really does step up and add a lot of layers to a deck if you're trying to deck build around it. Additionally, Master Tao the Chanter is here. This card allows you to, if it's sent to the graveyard, it lets you target an illusion monster in your graveyard and special summon it back to the field, but it does lock you from summoning anything but illusion monsters from the graveyard when you activate that effect for the rest of the turn. So Master Tao is a very interesting one in that this already saw some play in the Chimera decks, so you can use it, and I do think this is actually a very solid card if you can find usage for it. I think the only thing holding back Master Tao is that it really does need a deck that can get this reliably to the graveyard, and since Chimera was one of the only decks that reliably would use it as a fusion material, it was another good way to get it to the grave, but you could totally use it as well. And Monster Reborning any illusion is no joke, so that in a deck where it has a lot of illusion monsters, or any monsters that are already in the graveyard that happen to be illusions, you can summon them back, and I think that's really cool. Talking about Emissary from the House of Wax next, this one's a really weird one because it's technically a hand trap, where if your opponent declares an attack, you can special summon this monster. Then it also has the standard illusion effect, so it can't be destroyed by battle, but during the end of the battle phase, for the rest of the turn, your opponent cannot use the monsters that they have on the field as materials for summons, at least for the rest of the turn. So Emissary from the House of Wax is a really interesting one because technically it does have applications, but it does have applications only if your opponent intends to extend. Otherwise, it is still a hand trap, so it's not the worst card ever, but I do mention this because you do have to kind of think about it before you actually use it. So yeah, that's where it is. Now, talking about the next monsters, we have some really good ones. So one of the really good ones I like to say is that there are some boss monsters you can technically tech into your decks. They all have different ways of being utilized, and they can be kind of splashed in, and also some of them might have future support if, you know, Konami ever just wants to adjust it. So the next one we're looking at is Diabelzi, the original Sin Keeper. This one is a fantastic card for a few reasons. Basically, this is a very easy card to summon because you discard a spell or trap. Additionally, it forces all spells and traps, all spells and traps to be set before their activation or all spells to be set before their activation. So this is designed to be a floodgate against your opponent, because maybe they're playing decks that need their cards immediately activated. And yes, you can set a normal spell and activate it, which is fine. But the point is, it pins your opponent's ability, because they have to set a card and then they have to activate it. So if you have ways to disrupt them, this forces them to have to play that game of, okay, I'm going to set this, and then you could respond by hitting something set. They can't just immediately activate it because it's not a quick play, obviously. And then quick plays, if they're set the turn that they are there, they're like traps. You can't flip them up. So Diabelzi covers for that. Also, Diabelzi is just really solid in that regard, because this pinning effect is pretty decent if your opponent doesn't know how to play out of it. And it allows you to keep tempo kind of locked down into your favor. And it's one of the reasons why I think when it comes down to the only somewhat competitive illusion-based strategy at the time being our being the actual Chimera deck, because this is probably the best one to explain the logic of it. We also are able to see that Diabelzi does see play in the deck because it's solid. It's a solid card. I don't just say that as a joke. It's just true. It's a solid card. Additionally, it does have synergy with the Sinful Swells card. So if you're trying to tech this in some deck like that, you could technically use it. Because if you have a Sinful Swell card in either player's graveyard, you're supposed to summon the card. So you do kind of need that ability. What I was talking about for this deck is, or Diabelzi specifically, is that if you play in Chimera, you can revive it through other effects, so you don't actually have to use the Sinful Spoils cards, but you can run this in a Sinful Spoils deck because that's how you use its main effect to summon itself. So that's a little bit on my fault. Additionally, though, it does have some type of removal where you target one card you control and a card your opponent controls, and then you destroy them both. So the point of this is that Nightmare Apprentice can get you access to this. You can summon this, and then when this hits the field, this card can then use either the Nightmare Apprentice and another card and destroy them. So it does allow it to kind of be a how to put it, like ammo almost, if you want to think about it that way. Additionally, we'll talk about the next one being Nightmare Magician. So Nightmare Magician is an interesting one because I think where this monster is that it's not in the same boat, I think, as the others. And the reason I say not in the same boat is that this specific card is not bad. This card is actually pretty decent. The problem is it doesn't summon itself. If this card could summon itself, it'd be better. But the point is, its actual effect is really cool, because if this card battled an opponent's monster, you take control of that opponent's monster, and then once returned at the start of the damage step, if another monster attacks, you can destroy one card on the field. So the reason this is so important is that Nightmare Magician effectively runs into your opponent's monsters. You take damage, but then Nightmare Magician allows you to take control of that monster. So you can steal their bosses, and then it's a weird interaction because unless you have a specific negate, this thing just takes control of a monster. It doesn't destroy it. It doesn't do anything like that. So now you have access to it, and then you keep that monster. Remember, it doesn't say return control. You keep it. And then at the start of the damage step, if another monster attacks, you can destroy one card on the field. This basically allows you to, if you take that monster from your opponent and then swing with it, then you use Nightmare Magician's effect, pop a card on the field, giving you more disruption levels. Like I said, I think this is a very interesting card. I wish there was just a way to special summon it to the field. Otherwise, Nightmare Magician might actually see play. It's not a terrible card, but definitely it needs a lot more work, I think, of all of them, because it's not the worst. It's just not the best. But I definitely could see someone teching this as an engine if they feel like they need to have another monster, or they just need to find a way to disrupt their opponent. So it is one of those situations. So we do have it that way. Moving into our next one, we have Vorburial, the Dragon Undertaker. Now this one is interesting, and I'm not just saying that to say it. It is interesting, a card. I used this actually in Chimera when I played it. So if you have never checked out my my local hero vlog when I used to go to locals a lot more and I played, go check it out. I think I talk about this card. I did use this card in my deck for Chimera, and like I said, it's an interesting card. Now the main reason I wanted to use this card is that it's a big level, I think it's level 10, but the point is its effects aren't bad. It's a 3k beater. It can't be destroyed by battle, so effectively putting in defense means no one can run it over. But the important factor is that it has this effect where during the main phase, if a monster your opponent controls is sent to the graveyard, you activate the following effects based on where this card is activation, and then you can only use each effect of Vorburial once per turn. So if a monster was sent from the hand, which is like for a fusion, you special summon this card, or you can summon this card from your hand. If it's a card sent from the field, you can use its effect on field to make one effect monster your opponent controls lose 1500 attack. Then if its attack becomes 0 by this effect, you can destroy it. So effectively, if you minus something down, it gets popped. Main reason for this card was that when this card hits the field, after if it gets summoned from like your hand or something, this card is already at 3k. So in Chimera, it is very easy to get an OTK range really fast. And the thing was, this card accelerates that ability when your opponent looks and they're like, uh-oh, this thing has 3000 attack. It's going to be big, it's going to hit like a truck, and then it does that. So that's kind of the point. It does not hold back in that regard. Now, talking about the other important factor of Nightmare Apprentice, because I haven't talked about it a lot yet, I've been talking about most of the stuff. We'll talk about what it offers decks specifically, because what I've been talking about for the most part is the additional pieces it grabs, like just really good like generic cards. We're going to talk about its most important factor, which is what it does in actual decks that have illusion monsters. So starting off, we have a few. I think one of the more less obscure ones that definitely could benefit from this is going to be Archmage. So I've just recently looked into the Archmage archetype. I think this is an archetype that definitely does not get enough credit. This is actually a very strong deck for what it's worth. It is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but definitely has a lot more tools than people are giving it credit for. The main reason I would suggest running Nightmare Apprentice in here isn't just the fact that you can get access to Power Patron in the deck. It is the fact that Nightmare Apprentice is an illusion monster, and there are fusions that require you with different types on the field, and currently there are no illusion types except for the Archmage Power Patron in the deck. So this can help you get a monster on field for your fusion summons, and simultaneously also gain you access to Power Patron if you want to get it that way through that effect. So it does allow the Archmage deck to take advantage of another engine that could cycle. Now, this is just one of the ideas for Archmage. I think Archmage is still a deck that needs a little bit more experimentation, but it's definitely a deck that I would not sleep on, because I think this deck actually has a lot of potential going forward. But looking into another one, White Forest is actually a very good deck. I think I've seen some builds actually run Nightmare Apprentice. This is because there are some illusion monsters in the deck, especially the Azumina Elzet of the White Forest. Now this one has the ability that if it's in your hand, you can reveal it and then you summon another White Forest monster from your hand to the field. The reason I mention this one is that it is a target you can get from Nightmare Apprentice, and then you can reveal it and then summon another one from your hand. And because they do run synchros and Nightmare Apprentice is a level 6, you can find ways to try to make synchros with other monsters. You have a lot of like level 2 and 4 tuners, so you could try to synchro the level 10s, but the point is you still have the ability to use the Nightmare Apprentice as a good like level 6 material to get into your higher level synchros, and you do have the ability to use the Azumina cards as well as the White Forest cards to boost the ability of the deck. So that means you have access to all the Azumina fusions and stuff like that. So I do mention it because that makes this usage of Nightmare Apprentice even stronger, because it's now in a deck that has a lot of power itself. So it's very good. And the final deck I'll mention that already has really good synergy is obviously Chimera. I think Chimera is the best one to use Nightmare Apprentice, at least at the time of recording, because the deck has access to really good these very good illusion starters. Like all the illusion monsters in the deck of Chimera are starters, so when you summon down Nightmare Apprentice and Nightmare Apprentice actually gains you access to your different illusion monsters, you are gaining access to monsters that are already going to enable your plays. So Nightmare Apprentice is just a cherry on the cake, or cherry on the top. And additionally, the Nightmare Apprentice is also a fusion material that you can use with your other monsters to fusion summon. So I do mention that because it does mean that the actual Nightmare Apprentice serves an additional purpose in the deck, which is why Chimera was so far the best deck to use it, just based on those principles of being able to enable the actual plays of the strategy, enabling a deck to be more powerful than it already is. I think that's important, and it's always good to look at that when you're supporting decks with a card like this to access engines, and especially your own engine is the best to access with a card like this. Now, going into our final one, I did want to briefly mention Silhouette Rabbit and its trap. Now, this is actually weird because you could say Nightmare Apprentice doesn't technically get you access to it, but if you think about it in perspective, right? if you gain access to something and there is just a way to link, you can technically use Nightmare Apprentice and specifically the monster you make in combination with Silo Hat Rabbit. Like, you don't actually have to make Silo Hat Rabbit with those two monsters. The point is you gain access to Silo Hat Rabbit through other means. You go for Nightmare Apprentice, grab an illusion, normal summon the illusion, and then go ahead and have the Silo Hat Rabbit get the Silo Hat Trick. Now, Silo Hat Trick is a card that right now I don't think a lot of people play, but in the future, this card could become very useful as it allows you to negate the effects of face-up cards your opponent controls up to the number of illusion monsters you control. The reason I think this is so important is that if you have a deck that has just a bunch of illusions on field, you then can use Silo Hat Rabbit's effect to use Silo Hat Trick, or get the Silo Hat Trick from your deck, use Silo Hat Trick's effect, and you can negate a bunch of cards based on illusions on the field. And currently, Nightmare Apprentice is one of the only monsters that really gets a lot of illusions in rotation, whether it's from your deck to your hand or get itself on the field to be another another monster for the hat trick. So very good. And then finally, what I did want to mention briefly is that with the introduction of our first true illusion archetype in the Heka Hands archetype or Hecatrice archetype, we will be seeing that there's a possibility Nightmare Apprentice could be splashed in this deck, considering that as I've read most of the cards and none of them really lock you into anything in specific, like they don't lock you away from being able to use Nightmare Apprentice, there's a good chance Nightmare Apprentice will find a home in the Heka Hands deck as a tutor to get access to their strongest monsters. But guys, that's all I've got for you today. I do hope you enjoyed this video, as the main goal of this was just to show you what you can do and what you actually have access to with Nightmare Apprentice and the amazing cards you will be able to search. So I do hope you enjoyed it, and as always, I'm getting out of here. Remember to join with the Ad Army. Remember to follow the Ad Army too on Rumble, but also remember to join up on YouTube if you see this later on. And as always, this has been Brad from the Ad Army signing off, and for all of you out there, to sign on.